And just like that, we hit 4 o'clock and we are ready to bring you open source, the closeout of our open source training series for 2022. So yes, as I said, we're wrapping up training today. So I thought it would be fitting to share with you some stats around how our series has evolved over the past 2 years. In totality, since we launched our open source training in 2021 of May, we managed to bring you 8 sessions, bringing a community of members together of over 549 people. This year, we've managed to pull together 9 sessions with 602 members of our community, excluding tonight, of course. So we hope everyone still comes and trickles in so we can add to our numbers. We're so privileged that we managed to run these sessions on a virtual platform, managing to reach a global reach of an external community that we wouldn't have been able to speak to and share learnings with in a normal setting. So as you can see from our graphic over here, if you could just take a moment to have a look, our intent really through these open source sessions was to bring you an open platform and to build community that is a session of valuable content and awesome resources that you'll be able to take back into your workplace and share with your team and your colleagues. So in light of serving you and ensuring that we deliver on topics that you are interested in, I'll be sharing a link in our chat box. Please, if you could just take the time, it literally takes 1 minute. We'd appreciate it so much. We'd like to hear your recommendations and your thoughts around what you would like to hear in 2023. So I've decided to scrap the housekeeping for today since we bring you the same sort of housekeeping rules every session, every month. So I thought, let's leave that. I don't want to bore you, but I would like to ask you, since you all know, if you could just be respectful and please keep your mics off so that we don't interrupt any of the sound for our facilitator this evening. And please feel free to engage, raise your hand, and engage and interact with our speakers. She'd love to hear from you and just open up any sorts of questions or topics that you may have. And also don't be shy to enable your camera. So this afternoon, I have the pleasure of introducing you to our facilitator, Lize Moldenhauer, our managing director here at Omni, an advocate for making data-driven decisions. Although she might not be a data architect herself, she is passionate about driving the narrative on how leaders can utilize data effectively. I hope you enjoy the session tonight, and thank you from my heart and everyone at Omni for showing up every month and supporting us in our open source training series. Lize, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Jade. Yeah, it's indeed a privilege to be here today as we hit the end of November. I think this year has flown by, and it has been a very beneficial year for our community and engagements, and definitely in the topics of conversation that we have had throughout the year. So for me, as we get started, I'd love to share with you what we were going to talk about today. And that is, so we're going to investigate some different technologies and specifically looking at algorithms and how that is formulated within big data, linked to what is framed as exponential organizations. Further, I would like to explore some of the skill set around critical and computational thinking for the 21st century and what is meant by that and how do we go about that. And then unpacking how data can fit into our organizations. I think that it is a critical component for us from a business perspective. We cannot operate without it. So as Jade said, I am monitoring a chat on a different system. So I'm welcome engagement and questions as we go through the session today. So yes, please just raise your hand. Myself and my team will monitor the chat and we'll take it from there. So first of all, let's look at it. It's very much game on when we talk about data and computational thinking. So when we look at the future world of work, computational thinking is seen as the new literacy. And that was from the VP of Microsoft Research. And when we look at this literacy, we say, in the world of complexity and disruption, how do you activate your thinking and problem-solving mode? So it is very much, if we think about the concept of Mario, and I'm hoping all of you know who Mario is. And if you've never played the game, I'm sure your kids have. So it's a little bit like being like Mario. We need to tackle our life problems by moving through the different gates. And to allow us to move through the different gates, it does mean we need to think differently. And therefore, we need to think more computational. And linked to that, if we look at this computational thinking and we look at the concept of computational thinking, and linking it to exponential organizations, we need to ask ourselves, how does exponential organizations, or how does this thinking fit into that concept? So let's unpack exponential organizations just a little bit. So ExOs output is at least 10 times bigger because they focus on innovation and techniques as well as technology. Furthermore, they have an exponential growth curve. And they go from being startups to leading market players in a very, very short period of time. They are driven by information and powered by information flow. And I think that is crucially important. So if we link it back to big data, which we'll look at in a moment, we need to understand that the information they're talking about is real-time available data that allows us to actually make decisions. And furthermore, exponential organizations focuses on their massive transformational purpose. They think big. And MTPs is very much about not just the triple bottom line. It's not just about the profit margin. It is actually about how do we solve societal problems. That is why it's called an MTP, because it links to a massive transformation. In the future, everything will become more digital. I think we're at the receiving end of that, and we can see that within the framework of the exposure that we've had since COVID to where we are now. As organizations, we have been at the receiving end of budget reallocation when COVID took place. The reallocation was placed into business survival on the one hand, but on the other hand, it was very much put in line with digital transformation. So out of research, we have seen that most organizations had an exponential growth in digital transformation because COVID forced us to look at some of the change metrics and to look at how we do business slightly different. So they say that most companies will become software companies. And I'm going to challenge our thinking around that a little bit in a moment or two. It will be the ability to interpret and manage massive amounts of data through statistics and data intelligence and provide solutions to solve complex problems. So if we think about it, there's nothing at the moment that is not driven by data. And data is critically important to help us with information and by default, help us to make effective decisions. So not too long ago, it took about 20 years to build $1 billion company, as an example. If we take the new communication platform called Slack, they've done it in 8 months. Airbnb and Uber have reached $20 and $50 billion valuations respectively over the last 5 years. And they have been disruptive in hospitality and transportation. And it's nearly put those industries in a panic mode. So companies that have been successful for decades until now are having trouble to keep up. And the reason is simple. Many of the organizations are used to direct their activities centrally because that's the way everything has always been done. Currently, however, the market and the environment is changing so rapidly, and the future is so less predictable. And technology advancements is happening at such a rapid pace. As a result, our product life cycle or our service cycle is becoming shorter and shorter. And therefore, the element of transforming and understanding that data, technology, and access to that information is critical success factors to be effective as we move forward in the world of work. So just now I spoke about MTPs, and just to quickly go through what is an MTP, which is your massive transformational purpose. It's according to the co-author of the book Exponential Organization, Yuri van Kits, it is about organizations being 10 times better, faster, and cheaper than traditional organizations. So, but one of the things, except for that, that sets them apart is that they have a very clear why. So they are very purpose-driven, and it links to making that radical change and ultimately leading to a better world for all of us. So when we look at MTPs and developing MTPs, it's understanding the why. Does the organization exist? Define the actual problem space, because computational thinking is about solving those problems. It's about solving very complex problems. So we need to take the time to define that. Then we need to move into the how. How would we actually go about solving it? And we need to imagine that transformation. And just now I'm going to talk about the elements that are referred to as the 6 C's. And that's how we engage to make the how really come to life. And then we need to look at what will be the global impact. What would be the difference maker? And we need to make sure that it's a global approach. It is not sufficient to have localized MTPs anymore. We have to understand that we are competing globally with everything that we are doing because of transformation, data access, and the digitization that is happening at a massive speed. So linked with the MTPs, exponential organizations are divided into 2 key elements, which is external and internal, and it's referred to as ideas and scale. And here, I don't want to get stuck in this because actually, based on our international published research, we have a full curriculum called Workforce 2030. It is available on our OmniStack platform, and you are welcome to engage it there to do more deep diving into exponential organizations and what is meant by MTPs. However, for the purpose of our conversation today, I would like to focus on how it's just made up. So what is the composition? And then I would like to look at the elements linked to the computational thinking and the data side of it. So in ideas and scale, we have elements like staff on demand, we've got a community and crowd, we've got algorithms, we've got leveraging assets and engagement. So if we just stand still on the scale side and we look at something like staff on demand, a lot of times the way that we set up business and business structures is that we have a very stealthy, very focused core team. And then as organizations need to expand and contract as they are working on things, they have experts that they can engage with, which is your staff on demand models. And we see that a lot in the form of outsourcing, which is run through procurement models, et cetera, and as a business, staff on demand models, especially ExOs, have actually honed that solution, that model, in such a way that it actually helps them to deal with growing exponentially really effectively. Then if we just look at algorithms, when we look at big data and we look at how data is set up, it allows us to engage computerized systems to become more effective in our decision making. And I want to just loop back to Jade's introduction. I am not a data specialist by no means. However, I do have a passion towards data and systems computing and how it actually can assist us to become more effective in the way that we manage and lead organizations and organizations of the future. And then if we move over to ideas, just to look at one or two, if we think about something like a dashboard is available information that helps us see what is going on in our organization real time. So it doesn't mean we have to do analytical deep dives into something because we've set it up in such a way that that information is readily available. So for me, it's quite important that we need to look at all of the elements that contribute to both information and the implementation side of what gives us our why, our massive transformational purpose. Furthermore, I don't know about your opinion because I don't see that there's anything in the chat as yet, but I don't think we spend enough time in making sure that we formulate the information that we need as effectively as possible so that it helps us with product or service implementation. There is a time factor that we need to consider when we look at implementation of an MTP and wanting to make a transformational purpose. So what do we need to do? What decision making do we need to happen? And that is radically impacting the way we actually structure and operationalize our businesses. Further, if we look at it, without a doubt, investment in algorithms pays off for many organizations that want to scale their products and their services rapidly. So if we look at artificial intelligence or AI, the development has really come far, and there's a lot to be said of what we can actually see with artificial intelligence to where we are now. And from AI, we moved into machine learning. And then from machine learning, we're finding ourselves in the space of deep learning now, where AI has actually boomed. We have lots of development where that's concerned, and smart machines and smart thinking. Given that algorithms are much more objective, scalable, and flexible than us as human beings, this also makes it critical for us as organizations to be committed to driving exponential growth. To ensure our organizations doesn't get left behind, it is important to understand how different types of algorithms can help us leverage the data in our organization that we collect and that's available to us. And I think all of us can actually agree that data is critical, but it is critical when it's clean data. We've got to know what we want to do with the information. And that is also why we have legislation that protects consumers now with regard to data and data availability. But we've got to understand that data is actually a critical component to get us to a point to be more effective in decision making. So when we look at the algorithms, which I was focusing on, let's quickly have a look at what happens in an internet minute. So have a look here of the evolvement between 2016 to where we are today, and 2022 doesn't exist yet because that will only come out next year. But if you just look at the evolvement of activity in an internet minute, if you can think about it, every single aspect that is listed here is output science. If you look at the internet minute in relation to Twitter, if you just look at the impact of the statistical data between 2016 to 2021 in online shopping, it actually shows you how people's processes and thought processes have changed and how they, or us as consumers, because we might be in business, but we're also consumers, have actually engaged in the internet of things. We're making use, and everywhere we engage in these platforms is asking for information about us as consumers. And the information that is readily available helps those organizations, again, take that back in and make better decisions with regard to product and service iterations that they need to do. One of the key things that was interesting is just to see the shift between Instagram and TikTok. TikTok has started outperforming, as an example, an Instagram platform. And if we look at different generations and how different generations actually engage with different platforms, the typical type of response that you would get from the millennial and the Gen Z generation is that Facebook is for old people. They potentially only engage in Instagram and TikTok. And gamers, again, use different platforms. So it's important to understand that some of these platforms weren't even in existence, but they are very, very big organizations today. So let's quickly do a deep dive in what I believe most of us can actually relate to, and that is LinkedIn. Most of us engage on LinkedIn. Most of us has some form of presence on LinkedIn. So let's quickly look at what goes on from a LinkedIn perspective. So before I get to the data specific around LinkedIn, I just want to share the following, and that data is the new currency. We can see that with aspects that what is happening on the internet minute, to put it that way. And if data is the new currency, then data analytics is nearly the new bank, because they become the custodians of the data. And we therefore need to have new literacy. Just like in finance, we talk about financial literacy. Surely, if that's the case, and we understand that people need to actually understand how to work with their money, we need to understand how to work with data. And part of that then means if there's a new literacy linked to data, then computational thinking is it. And we need to look at what does it mean to become more computational. And it's not about becoming more computerized, because that's not the case. It is looking at how do we look at the integration of that. So let's move into LinkedIn as a case study. What is really great is that the LinkedIn case study, a company with the name of Just Connecting, did an algorithm report of about 52 pages. It is available if you would like to get access to it. Please just give us a thumbs up or a show of a hand if you want information, and then Jade will make sure that it is distributed to yourselves. But they took more than 9,500 posts from 200 different members. And Richard van der Blom, who is the founder of Just Connecting, they then took this whole report and it gave access to what actually, from a data perspective, is happening on LinkedIn. And I think so there's 52 pages, and I don't want to do a deep dive into all the elements, but what I took elicit two elements. The one is a post, the general post that most of us would do. And the next one is a poll, which I will show in my next slide. But if we actually look at the frequency of a post, notice what some of the data elements is that come through here. So publishing a new post within 18 hours from a previous post will negatively impact the growth of both posts. Which, if you look at this information, if you are the head of marketing and you have got a corporate LinkedIn page that you are accountable and responsible for, this is the type of information that helps you understand what frequency to which you need to communicate with your community. Furthermore, if you are an individual which is growing your own network and your own level of engagement and communication, and you want your post to actually make impact and be impactful, it's important to understand this. And the way they got this information is through the algorithms, through the data that we give them. because they can actually run the information in the background. We look at polls, for argument's sake, which was really interesting for me, because polls is actually quite, from my perspective, it's really quite engaging, and people are far more active in polls than I see just in a general post. And I don't know if you have the same experience, but for me personally, that is an experience. But what was really interesting about this and the analytics behind this was the fact that actually only when you have 2 answer options, which is really interesting. So there's a negative impact. The moment you have 4 options, as an example, you get 30% less reach. And I don't think when we put a post together that we are so intentional about putting the information out there and making sure that it reaches the audience and the number of people that we really want to reach. But this intelligence that is available, this algorithms, an algorithm report really makes it more, or provides us with the information to make a better informed decision of how we will engage and how will we use something like a platform like LinkedIn to actually engage with our community. So taking that into consideration, if we think about computational thinking, it is a strategy that uses many of the powerful ideas in computer science to solve problems. So it is about facilitating that information, and what do we do with that information, and how can we go about to solve the really complex problems that we have. And simply put, computational thinking is like computer science. It's not computer science, but it's like it. It is the thought process involved in understanding the problem and expressing its solutions in such a way that a computer can potentially carry out the solution. It's the automation side. It's thinking broader. It's thinking about what can be automated, as an example. It is fundamentally about using analytics and algorithm concepts and strategies, mostly related to computer science, analysis, and problem solving. It is about answering questions like, can this problem be better or more easily solved by a human or a computer? Is there a pattern between the problem or similar problems we have tackled before? How can data be organized to solve the problem? So if we think about aspects like digital transformation committees and wanting to digitize or automate things in our businesses, we have to realize that having computational thinking skills becomes really critical, because it is not walking over to a data architect or a data analyst and saying to them, solve this problem. We need to look at the community that is involved or engaged with that product, that service, and how actually the problem is impacted by them, and what do we actually want to make better? Whose life do we want to make easier? What information do we want to make readily available? So questions that I would like to leave you with to think about is, how can you create a general solution that works for a range of outputs? What would be the step-by-step procedure to articulate and solve this problem? What computational strategies do we have to deploy? And we're going to look at strategies in a moment. And what are some of the limitations or trade-off or constraints related to solving the problem in this manner? And with this, I want to say that we have to be intentional when we look at computational thinking and solving problems. So much more so in making sure that we're building on really good foundation. Because every time systems become smarter, like we said, the involvement of AI to machine learning to deep learning, the machines have become faster, algorithms have become better. It means that if we don't make smart choices now, we're rebuilding every time. So we've got to go right down to the foundation. And that's not necessarily smart. We need to build our foundations really solidly so that we can enhance what we are building as problems or as complexity changes within our context or within our environment. So let's quickly look at computational thinking. What is the skills? So what are some of the aspects that's required when we apply the concept of computational thinking? So there is 6 key ones: decomposition, pattern recognition, abstraction, generalization, algorithms, and evaluation. So it does involve taking a problem and breaking it down into a series of smaller and manageable parts. That is decomposition. Taking a big problem, or like we like to say, how do you eat an elephant in bite-sized chunks? So decomposition is doing that. When we look at pattern recognition, each part can be looked at as an individual, considering similarities between them. So what's the pattern? What are you seeing? What's the trend? If we go back to the LinkedIn study, that is what the trend was about. It was, what is the trend? What's the best poll questions? Then if we look at focusing only what is important and ignoring peripheral information, that is the element of abstraction. I think because there's so much access to information, there is so much information out there. We've got to be very careful of becoming distracted from peripheral information that's not going to help us anything. Next, let's look at generalization. Generalization is exactly that. We are looking for a solution to other problems and adapting them to solve new problems. So it's nearly by going, why redesign the wheel? If there is something that is really functional and good and that we can make use of, let's make use of that. And let's adapt that for the problems that we are facing. Algorithm, simply put, is the rule to solve each of the smaller problems that can be designed. So we look at the smart tools that can help us actually to say, if this happens, then that. And once we work through solutions, we have to get to evaluation. We've got to ask ourselves, is this good? Can we improve it? And if we say we can improve it, how can we actually improve it? So these are the skills required to be effective in computational thinking. And they are the elements that make up computational thinking. And if we look at it, it's nearly like our brains and how our brains need to be set up when it comes to computational thinking and how we actually need to engage. So how do we look at developing this? What needs to happen inside our businesses with ourselves to allow us to become more computational? Because it's easy to have a term like computational thinking. People need to be more computational. How? And what's quite interesting is when we look at research. So the World Economic Forum has published research around the future world of work and what are some of the critical skills that will be required. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a full Workforce 2030 curriculum that is actually linked to our own research that draws from the World Economic Forum and other really well researched and published information that is available. And that Workforce 2030 was specifically crafted to deal with the disruption and deal with the challenges that we are facing. It's not that we're going to face it, we are facing it right now. And they talk about the future of skills, so Workforce 2030, But if you think about it, we are nearly in 2023. We're 7 years away of what they are saying the future world of work would be. Some of the latest research papers that's coming out now is around the future skills for 2050. But that's all theorized at the moment. It's what they're potentially seeing that will happen. There's no substance in it yet. But if we look at what we know, there's a shift in the job market. There's a shift in the requirement and the skills that is needed from people. And if we look at this, and if we look at a component like computational thinking, it is not just engaging the computer. It is not just engaging algorithms. And like I said before, our data science and data analysts, it is actually helping our people to become more computational in the way they approach their thought processes and problem solving. And if we look at the job market, just some of the fluxes in the job composition, notice the shift that's happening. So what's the jobs that are in demand and growing? Notice that the first is data analytics. We have AI and machine learning specialists, big data specialists, digital marketing and strategy specialists. Why? Because it all centers around the aspect of data and that we can capitalize on that and to stay abreast of the changes and the disruption that's happening. We need composition in our organizations to allow us to be able to execute in those elements. But it's not just about having a data expert. It's also how do we engage critical thinking and computational thinking to allow us to solve the problems and the complex problems in the future world of work. So we need to ask ourselves, how do we go about developing these critical skills? And the thought processes that's needed is thinking. We've actually just got to engage our thought processes. And researchers from MIT, the University of Ottawa, and Broad University found that solving level in Super Mario Brothers is just as challenging as the most vexing problems in P-Space, meaning that it's even more complex than the traveling salesperson problem. And I'll explain that a little bit. We're not going to get stuck on maths, but what's important to understand is that P-Space is used in mathematical equations for computer science, but part of what they give the MIT students is they look at the traveling salesperson question. And one of that is, and how the question go is, given a list of cities or towns and the distance between each pair of the cities, what is the shortest possible route that visits each city exactly once and returns to the original city? So this is a problem that helps us solve logistics and time. So as a salesperson, you need to find the shortest route to go visit all your clients, but you need to do it in a flow that you go back to the city where you started from. And if you think about that problem, we solve those problems on a daily basis within the context of organizations. When we think about workforce planning, just making sure that you have got the right people at the right time in your workplace to produce the outcomes that is required, that's workforce planning. It's very similar to setting up and solving the problems as a traveling salesperson would have to. Consider the fact of logistics, of if you're in distribution and you need to make sure your trucks get to the depots and then also it's able to deliver to the clients on time exactly what they need, it's a logistic problem and it needs to be solved. So computational thinking and the thinking processes is what can we build that will allow us to automate certain elements, but then on the other hand, we also need to engage our problem solving, our computational aspects, our thinking skills to engage the problem and to be able to solve the problem. So Mario, yes, I'm a little bit obsessed, but I think it is also because we sometimes see that engaging in games is not necessarily teaching certain skills, but in fact, a game like Mario, for argument's sake, is engaging critical thinking continuously. And Mario, no, it's not you, Mario, because we have got a Mario online. It's another Mario. So let's look at the, oh, sorry, are we on, can you see this slide? It says organizational challenge. Yes. So thank you. So when we look at the organizational challenge, we need to develop deep learning within the concept of, or the context, sorry, of organizations to allow us to focus on adaptability. So let's just quickly look at this. We need to define a problem. I think one of the biggest challenges is that we do not take enough time to actually ask ourselves, what is the real problem? So we need to know what our business goals are, because the problem needs to be solved through the business goals. And if it does not link to your goals or your MTP, then why are you solving that? Why are you involved in that? We need to actually ask that we are busy with what we need to be busy with. Then we need to look at data mining. So what information do we need to help us to actually define the problem and then eventually get to solving it? We need to identify the required data. Access needed to data. I think we need to understand the critical component of our workforce needs to have access to information. We cannot ask them to solve, to be involved in, when they actually don't even have the information they need. So yes, compliance, making sure, the POPI Act or the GDPR Act or whichever context, locally or internationally, you are working with, I think it is important. Those elements are important, but access to information is a critical component for our workforce to engage in problem and computational thinking. Can't do it without that. We need to collect and understand data. We need to help people to understand what they're seeing, what they're looking at. Can they look at data and recognize patterns? When we look back previously at the engagement or the elements that make up computational thinking, we need to look at the preparation and pre-process. So can we select the correct data, the required data, the format of the data, clear data. It is so, so important that we cannot have data that is dirty data, doesn't help us. So yes, let me quickly refer to what Kaz is saying. Her question reads, would you say data-driven decision-making is an involvement of evidence-based decision-making as a management concept? The latter requires one to use and evaluate all evidence pertaining to solving a problem. Most definitely. I think it's just faster now because data is readily available, or it should be readily available. And therefore, algorithms and the digital transformation strategies that we are all busy with is making it, and is actually creating the biggest stress factor for us, because there's all of this information that is available, all of these complex problems that we need to solve, and we need to make the time to work through these things. So definitely, Kaz, I would agree with you. I don't know if any of the audience members have other insights or other ways of looking at it, but I would say definitely. And then if we look at model data, we need to select our algorithms that will actually help us. So get to the least point of resistance fast and build predictive models. It is about automating. It is about making things easier for us. And then we need to train and test. This is actually quite interesting. Train and test, verify and deploy is happening quite fast now. People are moving with MVPs and that much, much faster. So when there's a minimum viable product or service available, they go to market much quicker because they're also using the market as a way to actually train and test what is going on and to verify. So they're doing that at a quicker rate. However, be careful that if you have not spent enough time in fully understanding the problem, when you hit phase 5 and 6, your wheels will fall off. And the reason for that is because you don't fully understand the complexity of solving the problem and the elements that actually sits there. Today, we were just engaged in a conversation. What was interesting, it's got to do with us as a business being involved with data and uploading of data and information onto another platform. And what has become abundantly clear is that the organization that is the data organization that is becoming the custodian of managing that process actually did not deploy this to its full extent. And there could have been elements in the project management or the engineering side, like scope creep and those type of things that could have come in with the defining the problem phase. But it's very clear that they didn't fully understand the extent to which the people that is going to engage the system needs to use the system. Therefore, the system now is failing. The algorithms that they're supposed to build in, the automation that needs to sit there, the working with the big data that's supposed to happen there is actually not happening. And it actually now has a reputational impact on them as an organization. And therefore, we can train and test and we can go to market quicker with our MVPs, but best we have given the time with phase 1 to phase 4 that we need to. Having look at this from the organizational challenge point of view, and this is what we've got to do, I would like to emphasize the following key principles that is critically important when it comes to computational thinking. But before I move on, I'm quickly going to look at what Dion says. He says the difficulty or talent, the difficulty in finding talent balance between quantitative and qualitative data. Definitely. So I think that it is that there is a balance between the access of the numbers and just the algorithms and just what you can see with the qualitative. So what is the underlining aspects? And actually, that's exactly what we're going to look at now. What is underlining? What is driving that? Because you can work in a data-driven organization with the best algorithms, with the best system engineering. But if you fail at the following, it's actually going to lead us to not be successful in it in the long run. So when we look at it as the 6 C's of education for the future, which is key principles to actually apply when we look at computational thinking. So utilizing connectivity. So it's things like interdisciplinary approach, encourages collaboration, enable technology, information fluency, encourage reflection. Develop creativity. Oh my word, it's about being imaginative, looking at design. When we talk about STEAM, for argument's sake, it's not just STEM. So it's not just science, technology, and that. It is also actually arts, because we've thrown arts out. But yet we need curiosity, we need creativity, we need innovation. In fact, those elements has come through as critical skills for the future world of work. How are we developing those when we just threw the art out? Jack Ma, who's the head of the Alibaba Group, I love what he says is when he speaks, he talks about we need a different type of leader. We need a more ethical leader. But also when he talks about the future world of work and the things that they have done from a retail perspective in the Alibaba Group, the elements that come through there is in his talk when he addressed the World Economic Forum, he speaks about actually spend time developing art within your kids, music, team sports, engagement just on the creative side becomes so important because we need creativity to actually look at problems differently. We cannot solve problems in the same manner as we did in the past. It's not going to help us. We need to look at our culture within our organizations. Are they actually ready for digital transformation? In Salem Ishmael's book, Exponential Organization, they talk about the organizational immune system kicking against any form of change. We need to be aware that our organization is either ready or it's not. And if it's not ready, what are we doing? And it doesn't have to be formalized processes, but we definitely have to start talking the talk and making the culture shifts. And context of information becomes so important, like the why. Again, why are we doing it? Why is the changes happening? Why are we becoming more digitized? Why is aspects like computational thinking so critical and so important for us to have? We need to build a community. We need to look at real world problems. Think critically about it. So it's not just by taking on everything, it's also about the evaluation and actually looking into that. And then I'm very in favor of elements of things like project-based learning, or even within organizations working with matrix structures where people engage from a project point of view, where different disciplines actually work on something to actually come up with a solution. It does sometimes create conflict. It does sometimes create confusion with regard to who's accountable for what, that type of thing. But when you start defining the problem and defining the project space really clearly, then people actually engage. And it links to the next one, which is communicate clearly. So effective communication is important. We need to have peer and self-reviews. So are we open to feedback? Are we actually listening, or are we just telling people what to do? Information fluency, media fluency, and digital fluency. Those are three key aspects. And that's actually aspects that's important for all of us. If we cannot understand that information should be readily available, we can't hold on to information. Access to information helps people to make better decisions, and that ties back into the context of information again. And then media and digital, it's the way, if we talk about LinkedIn, LinkedIn is not something your business is supposed to be doing. If we think about it, most recruiters are going where exactly to see who you are, what your engagements, what your thought processes. They go to LinkedIn, they go and see your social media engagements. What are you interested in? What do you talk about? I mean, in fact, you don't even have to write a CV anymore. You can draw your CV from LinkedIn. And then also we need to work collaboratively, which links back to the concept of actually working within a process of project teams, like I referred to earlier. We need to look at team building, effective communication, which ties back to the previous one, self and peer assessment. So how are we getting that feedback? And then we need to have suitable technology to enable collaboration. So we need to ask ourselves, what do we need to be able to do this more effectively, to be able to implement something like computational thinking? What do we need to do? Because it's not just about the computers and the algorithms. It's actually about the skill individuals need to engage systems, deep learning, more effectively to solve problems. So Ian just said in one of his comments, is that at high school my sons attended, was very recommended to take either arts or drama as a subject. Yes, various future skills cover these subjects, 100%. It's so important that we actually realize that if we talk about creativity and innovation, we actually need to engage it. And what's really great on our online e-learning platform, OmniStack, we actually have creativity as a module of learning that you can actually engage and enroll in, which is really great, because when we talk about being more creative, it's one thing to say it, it's a different ball game to look at how do I actually become more creative and engage that side in the context of work. So if we think about the workplace and the skills application linked to these principles, for me, it's nearly like, you know, when we spoke about STEM and we said we need arts and science and technology and all of that. The aspects is, think about building a puzzle. Think about, I don't know, having Lego pieces, whichever one you can relate to. But it's nearly like all of us have pieces of the puzzle. So all of us have a little bit, There's one person that's got the picture. Another person knows how many puzzle pieces there is, and the rest of us has got pieces all over the show. What we need to do in computational thinking is bringing all of these pieces together. And then we need to ask ourselves, how do we automate certain things? And we might want to say the easiest thing to automate is the border. Because why? We can build an algorithm that says to us, two flat sides means that it should fit into the border. And that's how we actually need to then engage and look at how do we apply computational thinking. We need to engage the 6 C's. So we need to be more connected. We need to communicate. We need to give access to information to enable us to get to the end result, which is actually building the puzzle. So having said that, I'm now nearly at the end. I've got about 4 minutes. And at this junction, I am now going to ask you guys to get a little bit involved. And I want to ask you a question. So let's solve a problem. Mario is stuck on an island. So I want us to use one skill in computational thinking, which is decomposition, which is taking the problem and breaking it into smaller and more manageable parts. Tell me, what is the actual problem? So what's Mario's problem? Come, you can enable your mics or you can put it in the chat. But what's the problem? What's Mario's problem? Is he stuck on the island? That's all you know. Cassandra, he's stuck. Yes, that's a problem. He's stuck. What else? He's isolated, definitely. Thank you, Juliana. Now, Cindy's immediate problem is actual survival. Sidika, few resources, 100%. What is the problem? So, firstly, okay, so no, you can't be stuck on an island, not yet. So, firstly, the problem is, like Cindy said, is he is stuck on an island, but his immediate problem is survival. That's his immediate problem. His second problem is he doesn't want to be stuck on an island. He potentially needs to get off it. So the MTP, if we can put it that way, the massive transformational purpose is to get back to a continent, to get back home. That could be the big picture. The smaller picture is to actually look at the immediate need. So if we look at the immediate need, can you tell me, based on the immediate need, survival, what do you think he needs now? Let's see if you guys can actually survive on an island. What would he need? I'm watching the chat. Food and shelter, yes. What else? Water, yes. Fire, yes. Weapons, okay, guys, weapons. Find basic resources to survive, 100%. So when we look at decomposition, the big problem is I'm stuck on an island. Now, when I break it down into bite-sized chunks, I can actually tell myself, what do I first need? My first survival is I need water, I need shelter, I need food, and potentially a weapon in some form. It also means he might need communication. And you're quite right, Juliana. It might mean that he needs to put an SOS on the sand or build a fire tower. So if he sees a plane or a boat coming by, that he can actually light that so that people can see what he needs. And yes, I watch lots of survivor movies. I love them. But I think what we need to realize is that a problem can be very complex and very big. However, when we look at the skills or the techniques that we can use, rather, to actually deal with these extensive problems through the concept of computational thinking, when we break it down in aspects like decomposition, it starts going, okay, wait, let's break it in smaller bite-sized chunks. These become more manageable to actually deal with. Trevor, this is a game where is resources the princess. So it may not be survival, but rather work with the obstacles and get the rescuer. So if we look at this, the organizational challenge then is too often we rather give answers to remember than problems to solve. So as the closing words, I would like to say to all of you, engage your teams in ways to which they can actually deploy computational thinking through engaging problem statements and not just giving people answers to questions that they might have. So apply the 6 C's in the workplace. So apply connectivity, thinking creatively, thinking critically, being creative, communicate clearly, culture and collaboration. Consider those elements, consider how you will build on it to create an environment that will allow for better computational thinking. And if you have found this session interesting and worthwhile, we have just scratched the surface, obviously. And if you are interested to do more of a deep dive into computational thinking, you, Jay can share the link for us. It is on our OmniStack e-learning platform. You are welcome to enroll and actually go through the program. And furthermore, just as in closing, I want to say thank you very much to our entire community for joining us this year and being part of the value chain, being part of the engagements, the discussions, the topical issues that we want to get involved in. We want to hear more from you. Jade very nicely put the poll together, and we will share with you what you can look forward to in 2023. Some of the aspects that you can engage with us right now is Omni's development stack. So actually what we have done linked to development and development work, we've looked at development stacks within career pathing requirements. So we've actually looked at how to create development in individuals to get them from one level to the next. And it actually has integrated the future world of work with key components for a career in a specific industry. So you're welcome to engage us. We have some models that we have built, but if there's some specific needs from an organizational point of view, we can do more complex work for you or customize it. Then also what's really interesting and engaging is that we do engage Luminous Spark, which is part of our way to ensure that actually from a human development perspective, it really becomes important to be whole as a person and to understand each other really well. Then we also have our disruptive leadership framework. So we have launched our Business and Leadership Academy, and linked to that is disruptive leadership. So it takes elements like this and it puts in a curriculum to look at how do you actually lead in a very disruptive world, because there's different nuances that actually has come in. And then OmniStack is our e-learning platform, which Jade has shared the link, and you're really welcome to engage. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to give me a shout. I will remain online for a few minutes. If there's any questions from the audience, or if you've got anything you want to ask, you're welcome to. You guys have been engaging, but a little bit more quiet. So we are here if you've got questions. You can engage your mics and your cameras if you want to chat. Thank you so much. Thank you for being part of this journey and being in attendance. And we look forward to 2023 and what open source will bring then.